Well, you may be one of the millions across the nation waiting for your $600 stimulus check.
Tonight, we finally know why you haven't seen your money. Fox 46's Linnea Lewis spoke to a tax expert who broke it all down for us.
Number one question of the day is where my money? Show me my money.
Second stimulus checks are rolling out, but some taxpayers who use services like H&R Block and Liberty Tax are receiving the runaround.
Individuals who worked with a tax company.
It's now up to Kevin McCarthy to reach a deal on the United States debt ceiling, because several GOP lawmakers have proposed a new plan to address the debt ceiling, and the plan includes major changes to Social Security, everybody. Major changes to Social Security, that might be a good thing, because Senate Republicans are happy to leave the hard work on averting a cataclysmic debt default this year to the House new Speaker. The upper chamber Republicans are sitting out the early days of what is shaping up to be a standoff between their House counterparts and Joe Biden. A handful of Senate Republicans helped twice raise debt ceiling in 2021. 4 of those members said today that they have no intention of stepping down this time. Even the Senate Republicans have told reporters what matters is really what the House can create. They're in a position where they have the gavels, and we have to see what kind of strategy they're going to do. The current dynamic in the House means the Senate Republican minority is effectively handling the keys to McCarthy to cut a deal with Biden. Even the Senate Democrats had hoped to clear a debt ceiling by now. But now, things are getting confusing, and their Republican colleagues said that's not even happening. It's in part because Mitch McConnell and his lieutenants spent much of the political capital in December aggressively moving to pass a government funding bill that McCarthy complaining loudly and often. Many GOP senators have feared that kicking the spending measure of this year could risk a shutdown. Now, some Republicans doubt McConnell could even muster the 9 votes that would be needed to break a filibuster, even if he wanted to. McConnell said that he would and that he's not on a default. And with the government funded until the end of the year, many Republicans believe it's McCarthy's turn to make the tough calls. For example, Republicans like Susan Collins, who are about as amenable to lifting debt ceiling as possible, said that any Republican you'll find in the Capitol is willing to do it. At the moment, she said her preference would be for the president to sit down with McCarthy, listen to one another, and work out an agreement. She said that she didn't even know whether a so-called clean debt ceiling could even pass the Senate. Without a clean debt ceiling, no stimulus will be passed. But ultimately, the Senate GOP may be in a position to break the impasse and help find a solution that can really satisfy all parties. Because now the Senate Democrats, House Republicans, and the President have a lot of thoughts on this. The U.S. gas prices are back on the agenda in Washington, and the White House arguing that GOP-supported bills that are critical to the energy and energy policy will end up in raising fuel costs for Americans. House Republicans have teed up a vote this week on legislation that would release the oil from the Strategic Reserve and to increase on federal lands. This move is an example of how Republicans are using their majority to shine a light on the Biden administration's historic drawdown from the reserve. Democrats argued that by attaching strings to the use of oil, Republicans would hinder their ability to use it during emergencies. Last year, as gas rose to a high, Joe Biden tapped strategic stockpiles in an effort to relieve fuel makers. Republicans criticized the drawdown as a political ploy to lower gas prices before the midterms. And during an energy press briefing, the Energy Secretary highlighted that gas prices have dropped to $1.60, but it's still high. She said that we will not allow the American people to suffer because of the backwards agenda the House Republicans are advancing. Plus, for the 4th week in a row, we've already seen the average gas price climb again, 11 cents from a month ago. So things are not as good as it seems in Congress. What is guaranteed, though, is if President Biden does decide to send a stimulus, it will definitely help the people out, and people will get the stimulus they deserve, and people will be enjoying that stimulus check and using it towards things they need. But for now, we have to see if Joe Biden's actually going to do something. We have a ton of news about the 4th stimulus check, Social Security benefits, SSI, SSDI. We have a ton of news about this information, everybody, and you guys have to keep watching this.
From New York is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her amendment.
Thank you very much. And lastly, this final amendment requires and states that we shall not include tracks where oil and gas leasing would be inconsistent with our goals and the goals of the Paris Accords. We know that leasing more land to fossil fuel companies does not guarantee that gas prices will drop. As we've seen this past year, even when these companies have record profits, they do not pass along those savings to their consumers, to customers. What leasing more land does do, however, is guarantee that we will accelerate the devastating impacts of climate change and see more deadly and destructive weather events. In 2015, the nations behind the Paris Agreement set a target for keeping global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. The latest IPCC report spells out just how difficult it will be for the world to stay under that limit unless we drastically slash emissions in the very near future. If we do not course correct now, the impacts on the daily lives of our children and grandchildren will be devastating. No one will be immune, and the most vulnerable communities right now will continue to be hit the hardest moving forward. Even in rainy regions like the Southeast, wildfires are also projected to increase by about 30%. The Southeast United States is also expected to see a rise in new mosquito-borne diseases as temperatures warm. And farmers in all parts of the country will suffer enormous losses, and grocery prices will continue to rise.
The state is forking out some $9.5 billion to cover the cost of these refunds, set to reach the accounts of some 23 million Californians. Now, if you filed jointly, you could receive anywhere from $400 to just over $1,000. If you file independently, the checks range from $400 to $700. Now, the governor's office says this is the largest program of its kind in state.
Everybody mark these dates on your calendar. The lawmakers have officially announced new deposit dates as to when we can expect a second round of checks. As the inflation rate just continues to rise, many state officials and lawmakers are stepping up and taking action to get more inflation relief out to as many people as possible. This relief is likely to come in the form of a one-time payment, and Americans across the board are feeling the adverse side effects of inflation, with many of them slumping deeper into debt as a result. To help see taxpayers through these tough times, some states are providing relief. A few other states have already paid out stimulus for 2022. The Alaska governor has announced that $3,000 payments from the state's funds will be issued to qualifying Alaska residents. And those who filed by paper or requested a paper check began seeing checks in early October. The amount is larger than normal for residents because of the addition of a $650 energy relief check. Under the Colorado Cashback Relief Program, eligible residents received their payments. $750 for single filers and $1,500 for joint filers by the end of the month. Now, I know many of you are wondering whether your state or city does the same thing, and will they send out their own stimulus payments? Well, in California, residents who file their taxes electronically will already get the stimulus money by the end of the month of October. And now those who filed paper checks will get it between this month and the middle of next month. Illinois sent out payments to $50 for those who made less than $200,000 in 2021. The state began issuing checks on September 12th, noting that it would take about 8 weeks to send all the checks to people who qualify. Republicans are also expected to take back the House majority in the midterm elections, and they're already signaling steps that they would take to try to solve inflation. The GOP would also have limited power with just the House majority. And even if the party takes back the Senate, it is unlikely to have a filibuster-proof majority. And President Biden's veto pen is another factor. Republicans have to compromise with the White House and Democrats to enact their own policies. Republicans have given signals